Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and today we are installing some Duraflap Mudflaps on my buddy's F150. So it's pretty cool because now with the channel we've gone full circle. So we've gotten the Ford, we got the GM, and we got Dodge. Pretty cool to have all the major brands now. We're looking at all the trucks. But again, this is the F150 XLT. This does not have fender flares on it. So the rear quarter panel and then the front rocker panel are getting kind of beat to hell with rocks. So my buddy wanted to get to some nice durable mud flaps, and I have them on my GM over there. My brother's got them on his Dodge, so it's time to upgrade to Ford. So let's take a look at the mud flaps that he went with. So just like the Dodge, he went with the black powder coated flush weight at the bottom, both the front and rear. So these are the rear mud flaps. You know, it comes with all the hardware you need. This is all stainless steel hardware. Any of the brackets that they give you, it's aluminum, so nothing's going to rust or corrode underneath there. This hardware will probably outlast the rest of your truck with the way they're made these days. But again, the instructions are on point, and all the holes are needed for a true drillless installation, so we're not going to be drilling any holes in this truck. And just like all the other mud flaps that we've been doing from Duraflap, they have those grooves in there, which during the winter time helps with eliminating the amount of snow and ice buildup inside the wheel well. So even if anything does stick to here, it just takes a light kick to knock the snow or ice off of there. So these are the rears, just a couple bolts, and then the instructions on how to install that with one bracket that'll tie it into the frame. And the front's a little bit more advanced. They come with a custom aluminum bracket that slips in between the lip on the fender and the inner liner of the wheel well, and then it kind of sandwiches in there, just similar to how we did the GM. And then everything gets bolted up nicely. I say this every time I look at a Duraflap product, is they do their math, they do their homework on this stuff. It's amazing at how well these things fit, and you'll see once we get into mounting this bracket how well it fits around all the factory locations. But they do a really good job at making sure that you could use the factory bolts and factory liner screws to mount your aftermarket mud flaps. But I did mention at the beginning that this is for the fenderless version of the F150. If you do have fender flare-less version of the F150, if you do have fender flares, make sure you get on the phone with Duraflap and notify them and let them know, because there's going to be some minor differences on these things. But as with all mud flaps that come from them, as long as you give them the right information up front, they'll be able to give you a truly drillless installation, truly drillless product for your truck. So again, I'm extremely happy. This will be the fourth set of Duraflaps that we'll be installing. Cannot ask for a better mud flap. Just kind of give you the. So again, stainless steel hardware, lock nuts or nylock nuts holding the weight to the mud flap itself, and the weight itself is there to keep it from sailing. So a lot of times with mud flaps this big, you get a tendency for when you're driving for the mud flap to swing back because of wind, but that weight's here to eliminate that, or at least mitigate it. But yeah, the rears match the front. These are the standard length, standard width mud flaps. This truck isn't lifted. He doesn't have wider tires or anything crazy like that yet. We'll get there eventually. But yeah, these mud flaps are made for the OEM setup on the truck, so no leveling kit or anything like that. So that said, let's dive into the installation. Alright, we're going to start on the front wheel here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get this metal bracket mounted up in between the fender liner and the fender lip here. So in order to do that, we're going to remove one of these bolts and then loosen up the other one. So I believe, let's see, we're going to loosen this guy, and then we're going to take this guy completely out because we're going to replace that bolt. So what that'll allow us to do is take this metal piece, this aluminum bracket, and slip it up in here. Before we do that, we're going to have to bend this just a little bit to get it to conform in there. But then I'll show you underneath that this little tongue here mounts to a factory bolt underneath the rocker panel here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two screws here, and those are 5.5mm bolts. I'm going to remove those guys and then get this metal bracket mounted up in there, and then I'll show you up underneath how this mounts in there into the factory bolt holes, and then we'll go from there. But once you get this guy mounted up in there and bent into shape, it's smooth sailing. So let's get rocking and rolling on that. Alright, so we got the bracket bent and fit into shape, and then we loosened up these two bolts here. We removed the lower one, we loosened up this one so you can fit the bracket between the wheel well liner and the fender lip. Now we got to go up underneath the car So there's a screw here, it's a factory screw here, that this little lip here fits on. And what they do is they give you, Duraflap will give you a washer that goes in there and then a nut that fits on the end of that to hold everything up into place. So can't do that holding the camera, so we're gonna go ahead and tighten this guy. We're gonna finger tight it for now. We'll come back in, tighten up everything, and then I'll show you what else we gotta do in order to get the mud flap mounted. We got the bracket mounted from below, so on that bolt. Then now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and place the mud flap up into place. We're gonna start by tightening it up at the top and work our way down. We're only gonna do everything finger tight, that way we can get everything lined up, because you are gonna need to move the mud flap around a little bit to get this bolt. But basically the way this works is there's a hole on the inside of the mud flap. So let's see, this guy right here, that this black oxide bolt will pass through, and then it goes into this aluminum bracket, which is gonna go and hold into that squared tubing. So it takes some finagling to get it in there, but everything will fit. Just kind of be patient with it. So once you get the mud flap on there, you're gonna use these self-tapping screws, 1, 2, 3. Then where we remove that factory bolt down here, we're gonna use this longer screw. That way it'll grab through everything and give you enough room to account for the new mud flap that you got. Then we're gonna tighten everything up and we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so 10-15 minutes later, we got everything finger tight mounted up. So just to give you a rundown of what we did, we put in that metal bracket, and before we did that, we had to bend the metal bracket. And I used a tire. That gives you the contour to fit everything in there. But that metal bracket fits in between the fiber liner and the lip on the fender itself. Then once you get that into place, you start with the top screw, bottom, or middle, then bottom. Make those finger tight. Those are all self-tapping screws that go into those U-bolts, I think they're called. Then you take that longer black screw that they have in the kit, and that will replace that factory screw that you removed. I believe it's at point D. Then the final piece of the puzzle is taking that black oxide screw that they give you. That goes through the inside of the fender, or inside of the wheel well. It'll pass through the mud flap. It passes through the mud flap, and then through the metal bracket, and then it holds onto an aluminum bracket that they give you in the kit. Put a washer on there, a bolt, and then it ties into the square tubing. Then you tighten everything up. Once you get that, then you're smooth sailing. So here's that bolt before. Tighten that up to a factory screw. So we're going to tighten up this bad boy, and then we're going to go up inside the wheel well and tighten everything up. All right, well there you have it. We got our mud flap on. So just a quick once over what we did again. 3 self-tapping screws. Those go into the aluminum bracket. That bracket we bent to shape to fit between the fender liner and the fender lip. Then we pass that longer black oxide bolt through the factory location. This is the lowest point. Goes through this plastic little lip here on the bottom of the fender. Then we took our black oxide bolt, passed that through the mud flap, then through the metal bracket on the back of it, and then it held onto an aluminum bracket which squeezed onto this aluminum, or this metal square channel on the inside of the truck. So that's part of the framing. Then after that, what I did, and this is what I do with all my Duraflap mud flaps, I always tighten in the middle, and then I'll tighten the tops and bottoms. That way the middle pulls everything in, and the tops and bottoms are just there to kind of seat everything down. But overall, I think it looks awesome. So is a improved look to the factory no mud flaps that he did not have on this truck. So the black weights look really good with the rest of the truck. Kind of matches his running boards a little bit. But yeah, gives it a little bit more character. And again, I say this on all the Duraflap mud flaps that I'm installing. The reason why I first got started with these mud flaps is because of this right here. So this, probably what, 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch. It spills over into the outside of the vehicle. That is key in protecting from snow. So we're in Chicago, so obviously we'll get that winter weather, and we get tons of snow and tons of salt, and it kind of keeps that rocker panel or the quarter panel lower portion of your door clean. But what it also does is it keeps your running boards free of ice and snow. So the longer and wider the mud flaps are, the better of a job they do at keeping the road grime off of your mud flaps. And with these, you know, with all Duraflaps, if you do get any sort of snow or ice on it, all it takes is just a kick like that, and everything falls down on, if it hadn't already fallen off it. So plenty of clearance with the factory 275, 65, 18 tires. If he goes bigger, we might need to trim a little bit, but definitely plenty of room there, so he's not going to have any rubbering, and a hell of a lot of protection from the mud flap. So we're going to start on the rears. The rears are a little bit different in terms of how they mount. So what they do is they use these brackets. We already have them screwed on here. Those brackets pinch onto the fender lip here, and then use these 3 locations for these additional bolts to mount it. Up here, high on the inside of the mud flap, they give you an aluminum bracket, which you already put into a factory hole inside the wheel well. This is going to attach to here, and then it'll hold everything together. So again, really all this is doing is using a ratchet and a wrench to tighten up everything. So these little clamps just bite onto the inside of the wheel well lip, and they get mounted up. The one thing we need to do to make sure everything sits flush, I did forget to say this, is we need to pull out these push pins. So just using a panel trim removal, I'll show you. So using a panel trim removal tool, you loosen up with a small one, and then you get the one with a little bit more meat to it to pull it out. Alright, so after you get those little push pins at the bottom of the fender out, then you're good to go to mount everything on. And you don't need those push pins anymore. So basically what you do is you had those little clamps, those little aluminum brackets on the inside of the mud flap. Those fender clamps will hold on to the fender lip here. So you have to arrange them so they're all pointing this way and sort of squeezing on here. So as you tighten this, it pulls the mud flap up against the fender. Then these 2 screws down here, these 2 bolts, will go through those holes that had the factory push pins in it. Then you put a washer and a nut on the back, tighten that down. You can't mess that up because they only go into 2 holes. Then this screw up here goes through, so you got the bolt, you got the washer, and then it goes to the mud flap. I'll go underneath. And then it ties into this aluminum bracket, and that aluminum bracket mounts to the inside of the wheel well through a factory hole with that little angled aluminum bracket. So right now everything's finger tight, and you can see all the brackets going up the inside there. So everything's finger tight. We're going to line everything up, and then we're going to start tightening everything down. So the mud flap install is done. So here are the rears. So you got a little bit of an overhang outside the wheel well, catch all the rocks and tires. The inside, again, the rears probably take 20 minutes at most to do both of them. Without film, probably would have been pretty quickly. Number of bolts in here. So again, these go into those metal aluminum clamps that hold onto the wheel well lip. This goes through that aluminum bracket on the back of it, and then these 2 go through factory holes. Didn't drill one single hole in the rear for any of the mounting of that mud flap. Kind of a look at the rear. So it's a tough look, and they mount straight out. So that's pretty cool. Protect that exhaust tip for when he gets his new exhaust. And let's take a look at the fronts. So the fronts, again, they had that aluminum bracket that goes in between the wheel well liner and the fender lip. Then once you get that, you have the self-tapping screws that go into that. Got a black oxide screw that goes through a factory mounting point, through that inside mounting hole, that plastic little cap there. And then this black oxide screw here goes through an aluminum channel that attaches to the frame. So all in all, these mud flaps aren't going anywhere, and it's a cool look. So again, very happy with another Duraflap installation. 0 holes drilled, truly drillless. Other than that, that's our mud flaps. Thanks for watching.